I kind of think the moral is if the powers that be really want to get you, they can get you. And so they choose the person first and then they find the crime later. I don't think I called them criminals. I think I called them murderers, because that's what you are if you murder children. They were harassing me the entire time with that. So an example of that is one night at like 4 a.m, some real criminals, they broke into my office in Santa Clara, California. They literally crashed a U-Haul truck through the roll-up door at my business, and they came in and stole more than $1 million worth of my computer parts. I'm completely innocent, but even if I was completely guilty, 109 years is insane.
It's fucking
insane.
stupid. It's stupid. It's stupid.
And of those 109 years, 90 of them are for 3 counts of mail fraud, which is literally because I sent the tax return in the mail, right?
How are you, man?
It's been a wild journey this last year.
I've been watching you since 2017 when I got into crypto, even before that, when I was learning about Bitcoin. And to see where you're at now I literally called my team. No joke. Today's been last couple of days as I read into your story, it's been pretty hard for me. I literally calling them, I'm like, guys, I want you to review everything we do. Even things that everyone else does, I want you to re-review them to make sure there's literally nothing there that anyone could use against me in the future. I was terrified as I looked into your story.
Yeah, it's a pretty terrifying position to be in. But I kind of think the moral is if the powers that be really want to get you, they can get you. And so they choose the person first and then they find the crime later.
Yeah, look, first, before I start with the questions, I hope you're doing well. I hope your parents are doing okay, and considering the circumstances. And I know you remain hopeful and you're pushing hard and hopefully it pays off. Anything we can do to support, we're supporting.
Thank you for that.
So I want to kick it off with just getting your story. So your story pretty fascinating. I want to start with, I want to move away from the whole Bitcoin debate and what Bitcoin is, and instead focus on what you've been through and your journey. Because your journey starts well before crypto, selling firecrackers and going to jail for selling firecrackers. I started my first business on eBay. And I never thought someone could sell firecrackers on eBay and end up in jail for 10 months and you were facing years in prison. So I'd love to hear that story.
Yeah, I think it actually started even a little bit before that. So I actually ran for political office in the United States as a libertarian. And libertarians, for the most part, they want a lot less government. And so that means they're pretty critical of a lot of the things that the government is doing. And one of the things that I was critical of was the way the ATF and FBI handled the situation in Waco, Texas, where there was this... It's probably not too unfair to call them a religious cult, but even if they're a religious cult, you don't burn to death all the kids that are part of that cult, because the kids have no say in it whatsoever, and the kids aren't resisting. But that's exactly what the U.S. government did. And if you murder little kids, even if you're after their parents, you're still a murderer, because you should not murder little kids. And the ATF and FBI became very upset with me saying those things about them. And as you just mentioned, I wound up being the only person ever in the entire history of the U.S., or the world for that matter, to be charged for selling these firecrackers without a license on eBay. And this was, I was selling these in the late 90s, so it's important to understand the early days of eBay, there was literally a guns and ammo section on eBay where people were selling, guns and ammunition and anything and everything was kind of a free-for-all on eBay in the early days. But I wasn't the only person selling this product. There were dozens, if not, 100 plus other people selling this exact same product. Cabela's sporting goods catalog, the biggest sporting goods catalog in the U.S., was selling this exact same product. None of them had a license. I was the only person ever to have been charged for selling those without a license. And it was very clearly, clear I was guilty of the law as written, even though they weren't prosecuting anybody else. And so they told me that I could sign a plea agreement and I would do between 8 and 14 months in prison, or if I take it to trial and lose, and I clearly would have lost a trial, I would have done 7 or 8 years in prison. And so, of course, I was very unhappy with that choice that I was given there, but I chose, between 8 and 14 months rather than 7 or 8 years. So I signed the plea agreement and was wound up being sentenced to 10 months in federal prison, and then had 3 years of probation, and the probation officer just harassed me the entire time. And it's worth noting my actual charge was dealing in explosives without a license. And so the crime isn't selling the firecrackers, it's simply not having a license to do it. But the way the law is written also is anything having to do with explosives is automatically considered to be a violent felony. So not only am I a felon in the U.S., I'm considered to be a violent felon in the U.S. And so I wasn't eligible to go to the minimum security federal prison that they told me I was going to go to. And the whole thing has just been a cloud hanging over my head for the last several decades, including all the investing I did in the cryptocurrency space. Businesses that I would invest in, they wouldn't be able to get bank accounts because I was on their cap table. They were harassed from regulators because I'm on their cap table. Even sometimes the corporate registration companies would refuse to set up the corporation for the new companies if they knew I was going to be on the cap table because I'm a felon in the U.S. And so this has just been a giant headache for me for decades now. And even, some of the businesses I helped co-found, businesses like, XRP and blockchain, and then other ones, they literally have to do all sorts of corporate shuffling around to show that even though I'm on the cap table, I have zero control of the business whatsoever. And the regulators came after them, and it's just been just a giant headache, decade after decade now of harassment. And it's not that I don't love America. I love the American ideals. It was that I was afraid to even be there. It was why I had to leave. They drove me out of the country. But it's those American ideals that made me so passionate and want to speak out in favor of these things. And here I am today. What is it, 25 plus years later, still being harassed by a number of bureaucrats that just hate the American dream and the American way and the American entrepreneurial spirit, which is really alive in the center of crypto.
I want to go back to the story. When you were running as a libertarian candidate, you had a debate, and in that debate you called them criminals, and they were in the audience. You weren't aware, but two of them were in the audience. And I heard somewhere that I think it was your attorney.
And to clarify, I don't think I called them criminals. I think I called them murderers, because that's what you are if you murder children. Sorry.
Oh no, yeah, that's fine. Even if they didn't do anything wrong, you've got freedom of speech allows you to call anyone a murderer. But I also heard that they mentioned at some point when they were asked why you were jailed, they mentioned what you called them. Do you know what I'm referring to? They referenced what you called them when they were talking about why you went to jail. Can you expand on that?
Yeah, there was something like a pretrial conference where I was with my attorney, the prosecutor, and then two ATF agents were there. And we were saying, hey, I sold store-bought firecrackers. I bought them on one website, sold them on another. I didn't have a license. I can pay a fine. I can apply for a license, maybe even do some community service. This shouldn't be a big deal. And the ATF agents, one of them literally pounded his hand on the table, angry, saying, you didn't hear the things that he said, in reference to the things I said in the political debates with the Republican and Democratic candidates. And so they weren't mad about anything that I had done. They were simply mad about the ideas that I was expressing. And I'm an effective communicator, right? I do a good job of getting the word out. And again, I'll say it over and over until the day I die. If you murder little kids, you are a murderer. And it doesn't matter what the parents were doing. You don't murder little kids. And these people literally, they were posing for photos on top of the dead bodies of little kids. That's horrible, horrible, horrible thing. And nobody should put up for that or allow that sort of thing to take place.
I'm an optimist when it comes to the legal system in the US and the Western world. But over the last few years with the lawfare that we've seen, I've become a lot less optimistic. What was the judge's response? Didn't the judge see this as lawfare in action? How did the judge agree to jail you when no one else was jailed for selling firecrackers without license?
Yeah, nobody else was even charged for selling the firecrackers without a license. And so the transcripts of what the judge actually said that morning are online somewhere. And basically he lectured me about how America has a long tradition of libertarian thought, and it's very important that people are allowed to have their own thoughts and ideas and be allowed to express those. And I don't want you to think that why you're here today has anything to do with your political views, but I'm going to sentence you to prison. And and even literally the day I was sentenced, the company I was buying them from was still selling them without a license. The manufacturer was still making them without a license, and so the whole thing just is.
So the other sellers,
for me.
The other sellers on eBay, you said you weren't the only one. The other sellers on eBay and off eBay were still selling firecrackers without license after you were jailed?
Yes, that's correct. And the manufacturer was still making them, and the resellers were still reselling them even while I was in prison for it, and none of them had a license. And eventually all that happened to the other ones was they were told to stop selling them. Nobody paid a fine. Nobody went to jail. Nobody else was prosecuted criminally in any way, shape, or form. I'm literally the only person to have ever been charged with selling those without a license. And they sold millions and millions of those. It was a pretty popular product because people like firecrackers.
And that's terrifying. That's terrifying to even imagine. And then you left the US and you renounced your citizenship. So you left the US the first day you could, correct?
Yeah, literally on the very first day I was allowed to leave the U.S. because I was so mad about the way I had been treated and how I was railroaded for my political views and literally sent to prison. Talk about damaging to my business. When I finally went to sign the plea deal and had to go to prison, I had maybe 7 or 8 employees. My business was really starting to take off and I could feel it. I was really on the verge of something big and had to go to prison. And then I had to lay off everybody except for 2 employees to do the best they could while I was gone. And then, lost 10 months in prison and then 3 months of probation. I focused on my business again, but then literally they were harassing me the entire time with that. So an example of that is one night at like 4 a.m, some real criminals, they broke into my office in Santa Clara, California. They literally crashed a U-Haul truck through the roll-up door at my business, and they came in and stole more than $1 million worth of my computer parts. And so the police came out and they took a report and okay. But then like 2 weeks later, another company called my business trying to sell me the exact same parts that had been stolen. So I'm so excited, right? Like I found the stolen parts, more than $1 million worth of parts. I called the local Santa Clara police. I said, hey, great news. I found the parts that were stolen from my office last week. The Santa Clara police did nothing. The company that had called me that had my stolen parts were down in LA. I called the LAPD. They did absolutely nothing. I figured this is a big deal. It's like, they're stealing stuff in Northern California and it winds up in Southern California. Maybe this is some sort of international or interstate crime ring. So I called the FBI. The FBI did absolutely nothing. They did absolutely nothing to help me. I literally found my stolen parts. They did nothing to help me whatsoever. But what they were Johnny on the spot with is after this break-in happened, and they stole more than $1 million of my computer parts, I spent a bunch of money fortifying my building so that they wouldn't be able to crash a car through any of the doors ever again. And I put extra locks and installed these big steel doors and everything. They then had the fire department and the Santa Clara Police Department come out to my office and say, you can't have this lock, you can't have that security device, you can't have this door locked this way. And they were making me undo all of the security measures I put in place that would prevent future robberies from happening. And this is unfortunately a pretty common thing for memory businesses to have their inventory stolen. I had friends of mine, one of them got pistol whipped and had his skull fractured when they were robbing his business. Another, he wasn't the owner, he was just the sales guy, but he was wearing nice clothes, so the robbers thought he must be the owner. They were literally burning cigarettes into his arm, trying to get him to say the combination to the safe that had the expensive computer parts, and he didn't even know it. And so these are friends of mine, and so I'm lucky that the robbers only showed up in the middle of the night. Well, I wasn't there, none of my employees were there, but the police did nothing to get my parts back. They did nothing to catch the criminals, but they were literally threatening to close down my entire business if I didn't undo the security measures that I put in place. And so it just drives me nuts. How would anybody want to put up with that sort of thing when they're harassing the honest business people and they're doing nothing to catch the criminals? And that it was that way over and over and over again. And I have story after story of that sort of experience in my time in the U.S.
So before going back to your story on leaving the US and renouncing your citizenship, how do you think the US got to that level? How do you think it got to the level where entrepreneurs are being targeted because they didn't follow certain rules or because they said something wrong? And you've got criminals being let go if they're doing a crime that's not considered too serious, what's happening in California right now. How did the system get so flawed?
I don't know is the short answer, but it's gotten worse and worse over the years. And California has been leading the way in terms of allowing these problems to fester and become even worse. I love California. That's where I was born and raised and grew up, but it's gotten worse over the years, and maybe that'll turn around here. But the short answer is I don't know. But if you look at it like rule of law and enforcing punishment against real criminals, that's what makes a safe society. And when you let these little things go, it just gets worse and worse. And
when you start scaring entrepreneurs and free speech advocates away from your country, that's definitely not the right path. I want to go back to your story. So you left the US. Where did you go and did you decide immediately you want to renounce your citizenship? What was your plan then?
Yeah, the moment I had been treated that unfairly, I knew the U.S. wasn't safe for anybody that was willing to speak their mind like I was. I have lots of interesting ideas. I'm doing interesting things. I want to say what I think and not be afraid of that. And I was terrified of the way I'd been treated in America and thought that there was going to continue to be treated that way in the U.S. And so at that point, I had one Japanese girlfriend before, and so I thought, okay, I'll go and give Japan a try and see how that works out. But if I'd had a British girlfriend, I would have wound up in England, or if I'd had a Brazilian girlfriend, it would have been Brazil. It was just completely by chance that I wound up in Japan. But here I am, wow, 20 years later. Time goes fast. But now I speak fluent Japanese as well, and it's been an exciting journey. But the only reason I left is because I didn't feel safe there. If I had felt safe, I would have stayed. Because
so you left in
to stay where they're safe.
You left in 2014, correct?
No. I left in 2006.
Oh, sorry. You left in 2006. You renounced your citizenship in 2014.
Right. And I looked into trying to renounce my citizenship the day I was allowed to leave the U.S., but it was difficult to do, and it's very expensive to be able to get another citizenship and to be able to renounce. And then so another big impetus is I knew that the bureaucrats and the people that hate cryptocurrency were going to attack any sort of cryptocurrency entrepreneur. And so it just seemed far too dangerous to be an American living in America and seeding all the new startups in the cryptocurrency ecosystem. So that's what really pushed me over the edge, because it just seemed too dangerous to be an American.
So I want to dig into so now you're facing a significantly more scary challenge and more scary charges, and that could end up causing you to spend the rest of your life in jail. You spent 10 months in jail 2 decades ago, and now you're facing over 120 years in jail for various charges. So can you tell us more about these charges as I dig into them a bit further?
Yeah, the short answer is that they're 100% fake. I hired the very best professionals and gave them all the information to do everything exactly right. And this is just another example of they didn't like the things that I was saying and the things that I was investing in and spreading these technologies to the world. And so they came after me. And it's 100% lawfare. And unfortunately, there's been a lot of lawfare going around in the U.S. And lawfare is when they find their political opponents or people they don't like politically, and then they just go and try and find a law that they can use to prosecute them with. So, and even all of my tax attorneys and tax accountants, all of them to this very day say, Roger did everything right. He wasn't deceiving us. Everybody's on my side, except for some petty bureaucrats. But I'm very optimistic now that the administration has changed. Like the Biden administration hated cryptocurrency. They absolutely hated it. And now with the new Trump administration, they're saying, hey, we're going to make America great again. And they want it to be the center of cryptocurrency. So that's fantastic for me. And I'm hoping they'll recognize that I want to be a part of that. I've been a part of that for more than a decade. I want to continue to be a part of that. And I don't want to have to be afraid. So I'm hoping that they'll see that and fix the errors and the mistakes of the last administration.
So you believe those charges as 3 counts of mail fraud, 2 counts of tax evasion, and 3 counts of subscribing to false tax returns. So you're saying that those counts are fabricated because of political reasons. Why do you think that is? Why are they going after you now in your opinion?
First of all, yes, they're all 100% fake. I'm not guilty of any of it, total fake. And why are they going after me? I've been one of the loudest, most vocal voices in favor of cryptocurrency all over the world. And the Biden administration hated cryptocurrency. They were going after every cryptocurrency business. They were harassing Ripple, harassing Kraken, harassing every single cryptocurrency business in the U.S. They hated it. They're even, Elizabeth Warren's out there busy tweeting about how much she hates cryptocurrency. So, and before Michael Saylor, for a long time, I was basically the face of cryptocurrency. And so, what bigger trophy target could they possibly have than me? So, and I'd love to correct another thing that was going around on Twitter. I saw that, or X now. People were saying, Roger could have settled, he could have just paid the money. Like, never once have they even told me how much I owe. We literally filed a Freedom of Information Act request asking the IRS, tell us how much you think I owe. Show us your calculations. They still haven't come up with a number because they don't know either. It's just, I was literally I was the first person in the world to start investing in cryptocurrency businesses. I was one of the very first people in the world to try and pay taxes on Bitcoin as well. This is way back in 2014. When the global trading volume, this is right after Mt. Gox had collapsed, and the global trading volume was less than $10 million a day, and Bitcoin was traded each day. So it's just vindictive pettiness by a couple of bureaucrats out there to come after me with this, more than a decade after I left the U.S. and even, not even being an American.
So I agree that the previous administration was extremely anti-crypto, and I think it's difficult for anyone to disagree with that. But you've got a lot of advocates in the U.S., Brian Armstrong, Michael Saylor, and obviously you were earlier than the names I'm mentioning so far, CZ, Pompliano, Vitalik, the list goes on, the Winklevoss twins, they're all based in the US. And we haven't seen any criminal charges against any except CZ. And he spent a few months in jail. Why do you think you in particular, why do you stand out of that group of voices advocating for crypto and Bitcoin?
All of those people are very, very big in cryptocurrency and Bitcoin and advocating that sort of thing. And I think a lot of them share similar political views to my own. But I was far louder than all of those people in terms of my espousing libertarian ideals and free markets and personal sovereignty. And so I think that's what the politicians, especially in the Biden administration, hated the most. I was out there saying, hey, free markets work. People having control of their own lives, their own money, that lead to a better outcome for everybody. We need to get the government out of the way of the economy and put individuals in charge of their own lives and their own businesses. And I was saying that louder and more effectively and walking the walk as well, even more so than those other wonderful friends of mine that you named as well.
So another question I have for you, Roger, and I'm a bit inquisitive, so I really want to understand what the charges are and understand the process that got you here. To bring more awareness to it. You renounced your citizenship, you left the US in 2006 and renounced the citizenship in 2014. So I have 2 questions there. Number one is why not renounce it when you left? And then the second one is why renounce it? Why couldn't you maintain your citizenship but just live outside the country?
So the first question, why didn't I do it earlier? I wanted to. The moment I left the US, I literally hired a former IRS agent, ironically enough, to look into what it would take for me to get citizenship somewhere else. And not be a U.S. citizen anymore just because it was so frightening for me. And I'd been terrorized by those people the last time around as a young man. And the truth of the matter is it's really difficult to get citizenship somewhere else and takes a lot of time and effort. And when I was 26, I wasn't in a position really financially to do that. It would have taken almost all of my net worth at that point. And so at that point, I just decided it would be safer to live outside of the U.S. and maybe I'd renounce later. And so when I finally did manage to renounce, it took until 2014, but I started working on that full time as well in 2011. And so it took 3 full years before I could even get another citizenship and be able to renounce my U.S. citizenship. And the only reason I did it is it's not because I hate America. It's because I didn't feel safe from some of these petty, bureaucrats and law enforcement people in the U.S. that just want to target somebody that has different political views than their own. So the reason it took so long is because it's really hard to do. If you haven't been through it, it's really difficult, and it's even more difficult as a convicted violent felon in the U.S. Like, that's haunted me to this very day. Banks don't want to deal with me. Like, it's just such a difficult situation to be a felon in the U.S. Like, certain countries even don't want to let me in because I have a felony conviction in the U.S. It's really
which countries couldn't you get into?
So, for example, I've been living in Japan for a long time now. Even when I go to Japan, every single time I have to mark on the form that I've been convicted of a crime in another country, and they send me to the secondary inspection. And I'm really fortunate. My sentence was 10 months. If my sentence had been a year or longer, I would never be allowed into the country at all. And so there's quite a few countries around the world where that's on the visa application form. And for example, I should qualify for visa-free access effectively to Canada. I'm not allowed to Canada. I can't go to Australia. There's a lot of places around there that it's really difficult to get a visa.
Right now, you cannot go. I'm originally from Australia. You cannot go to Australia right now?
Yeah, I applied for a visa to go to Australia. The first time, to their credit, they approved it, but then the conference that was supposed to take place was canceled, so I didn't wind up going. And then I applied for a visa for another conference that was happening, and then they haven't approved that one. And it was it's because of the felony is the reason why, and it's just been a headache the entire time. So
I want to go back to renouncing the citizenship. It seems that this is so. Elon commented on a tweet, on a post where he said Roger Ver gave up his U.S. citizenship. No pardon for Ver. Membership has its privileges. What's your response to that comment by Elon?
First of all, America's about liberty and justice for all. It doesn't mean only justice for members of the club. America's supposed to be liberty and justice for all. So I am 100% innocent of the charges they're accusing me of. Where's my justice, right? Where's my justice? And so in regards to being part of the club has its privileges or whatever he said, why am I still paying the membership dues if I don't have any of the privileges, right? So it just seems so contradictory to me, the whole thing. And so I don't know, maybe Elon's a pretty busy guy. Maybe he hadn't had enough sleep that day and was in a bad mood for whatever reason. But I think if he spends some time to reconsider that, he'll see that, if I'm innocent of the charges, which I am, I deserve some justice. All the charges against me should be dropped. This whole thing is crazy. And I invite people, head on over to freerogernow.org. They put up all the different court filings there too, so everybody can read it for themselves. And I was interesting, lots of us, I'm sure we spend lots of time talking with different, ChatGPT or different LLMs nowadays. I fed all the court documents into those, and I asked it, which side's arguments are stronger? And it said Roger Vere's side's arguments are much stronger. The government side relies on a bunch of, I forget the exact wording used, but half-truths and misrepresentation. And so it was really interesting. I just purely gave all the court documents and all the different arguments into the ChatGPT and said which side seems to have stronger arguments. And even ChatGPT read these hundreds of pages and said Roger's side is much clearer because I did everything right. I literally hired multiple layers of professionals to check everything because I knew I was going to be a target because I had already been a target for my political views. And if I'm still out there on Twitter and everywhere else saying these things I believe in, I knew I was going to be a target again. And sure enough I was. And I got word too. I heard most of the questions around, to the different people in the grand jury. It wasn't about did Roger pay his tax for this or that. They're asking about my Twitter account. What the heck does my Twitter account have to do with what taxes I paid or if I paid them properly? But yet they're busy asking all about my Twitter account. And so that just shows how politically motivated the whole thing is.
So the claims against you, there's a few of them. So one of them is that, so when you leave the US, you have to declare what your assets are and you face what is called an exit tax. So you pay tax on what your assets are worth. So they said that you misrepresented the value of your assets when you renounced your citizenship in 2014. So I'm assuming you owned a certain amount of Bitcoin. I think it's 130,000. And what I assume is yet on the documents when you filed your tax, you said that you owned less Bitcoin. Is that allegation correct?
No. The short answer is no. The more complicated answer is that it doesn't say that you have to report how many Bitcoins you own. You have to report the value of your Bitcoins, right? And so I hired a whole team of professionals and I gave them all the information and all of them, figured out. And remember, this is 2014. Bitcoin wasn't liquid like it is today. The global trading volume on the day I renounced was 7-point-something million dollars. So how could you possibly say that your Bitcoin are worth more than the entire global trading volume there, which is, the they found the person, and now they're trying to find a crime to charge them with. And I did 10 months in prison when I was in my 20s. Last year, basically this entire year, I've been in prison on the island of Mallorca, which is a nice place, but it's not as nice when you're not allowed to leave. And I was in prison in Spain for just under a month last year as well when they first had me arrested. So
we're
this
in the
has
same
been
place
incredibly
as John
disruptive to my life.
In the same place as John McAfee, who his life tragically ended there.
Yeah.
And he was also being extradited to the US. He was a friend of yours.
Yep. Yeah, personal friend of mine, amazing, amazing guy. The world is a poor place because he's gone. And that guy was so full of energy and so full of life. Like, it's just really, really sad that the U.S., it's another example. One of the star entrepreneurs of America, right? One of the amazing American entrepreneurs. The U.S. ran him out of the country and persecuted him until either he was murdered or took his own life or somewhere in between. Like, really, really a sad story. And the bureaucrats in America that were prosecuting him should be ashamed and embarrassed of the way they behaved as well. He was a true American hero. So
the other 2 counts are of tax evasion. And when you renounce your U.S. citizenship, about paying your exit tax, and they claim that you intentionally misrepresented the value of your tax filings. And what you're saying is that back in 2014, valuing Bitcoin was very difficult. Because let's say the value of your Bitcoin was, I think it was in the hundreds of millions, 150 million at peak. If I could be wrong, but it was at least in the tens of millions at the time. And it was bigger. You had so much Bitcoin that it was more than the daily volume on the market. So it was difficult to value them and take into consideration the slippage if you had to sell your Bitcoin. Am I connecting the dots?
So that was some of the conversation that went on. So again, I hired the best tax professionals, best appraisers, the best everybody to go and take a look at everything, gave them all the information. And then I reported the valuations that they told me to report because they had to audit everything, the businesses, myself personally, the Bitcoin, all these different things. And my tax returns, thousands of pages long most of these years. Like, it's not like it's something, I whipped it out in half an hour before I went to bed on April 14th so I could file it on the 15th. It took years, and I spent hundreds of thousands of dollars paying all these tax accountants to figure everything. So it's not like it was some, one-page form I filled out one evening. This was a huge amount of work, and I hired the very best professionals I could find, and I followed their advice every step of the way, and I gave them all the information they needed to do everything. And for the most part, it was the tax professionals dealing with my tax accountants. So I wasn't even in the loop for a big chunk of it, if not the majority of what was going on.
And another thing, when you look into tax evasion, how important is intent? So is there a big difference when it's a mistake, you make a mistake in your filings versus intent? Because they even raided your attorney's offices. And for that to happen, for them to have they have to go to court and get it's not a court order. What do you call it?
Yeah.
A warrant to be able to enter the offices of your attorneys, and because of client attorney privileges. But for them to be able to get that warrant, there's a certain criteria that has to be met where the attorneys are also involved in the fraud. Can you expand on how they were able to even gain that warrant and what that process was like?
They didn't even have a warrant. They just showed up unannounced, guns on their hip at my attorney's office and started interrogating them about my tax returns. Like, that is not supposed to happen in America. And we literally fought them all the way to the United States Supreme Court on that issue. And then the Supreme Court ultimately decided not to decide that one. And then when they finally got the documents, all the documents just proved that I was trying to do everything right and telling my accountants and attorneys in writing, do everything perfectly. I'm sure I'm going to be audited. I'm sure I'm a target of the IRS. We have to get everything perfect so that there's no room for them to harass me. And so I'm sure they were really disappointed when that's the sort of emails that they got after I fought them all the way to the Supreme Court. And maybe in hindsight, it made them even more angry because I made them spend all this time and money and effort. And when they finally got access to my attorney-client privileged communications, they just saw me telling all my attorneys and tax accountants, do everything perfectly because I know the U.S. is out to get me.
Okay, so I'm just trying to check if it can even raid an office of an attorney without... No, the IRS cannot legally raid the offices of a client's attorney without a warrant. That's under the Fourth Amendment.
Totally illegal. And so the entire case might get thrown out based on that alone as well, in addition to me being factually innocent of what they're accusing me of.
So now, obviously, you're seeking a pardon, and you've been very vocal about it. You posted a video recently as well. But you're also pretty confident about I did an interview with Andrew Tate, who's also facing prosecution in Romania, and he's winning that case. And I had a discussion with him, and the rate of success, I don't know what it is with what you're facing in the US, but the rate of conviction in Romania was very, very, very high. It was like over 98% for, I think it was DICOT back in Romania. And so he had a slim 2% chance of of not being found guilty. And he seems to be going down that path. So it's working out well for him. What's the conviction rate when it comes to charges by the IRS for tax evasion? That's question number one. And question number two is, how hopeful are you about the case?
So I don't know the exact statistic, but it's probably something like 99% conviction rate in the US as well. But that's probably when they're going after people that actually did do some sort of tax evasion. Like in my case, it is so incredibly clear that I am innocent, and that not only am I innocent, the IRS is lying in their indictment. Like anybody can read it. They are just plain lying. And so I think any jury will be able to see that. And if it comes to that, I'm more than willing to go to trial, and I'll prove my innocence in court. But I'll be annoyed if I have to do that, because it'll take up multiple years of my life as well, and a whole bunch more additional money and time, which I'd rather, put into investing in the cryptocurrency ecosystem and spend my time and effort on things that actually make the world a better place, instead of fighting off these petty bureaucrats that are upset because I'm a libertarian and I've been, one of the most successful venture capitalists in American history ever. Like if you look at it, it's just, I think
their conviction rate, maybe it's a good positive note here, their conviction rate is 88% in 2023, a bit lower than 2022, which was 90%. So better than DICOT. And Andrew Tate seems to be doing well there. And you seem to have a pretty strong case based on this discussion. Can I go back to the point you made earlier? So we just read, I checked online, and you just said it yourself. It's illegal for the IRS to raid the offices of an attorney, of a client's attorney. And there's a very direct answer. It just says no. The IRS cannot legally raid the offices of a client's attorney. So I'm just curious. Again, I'm an optimist when it comes to the legal system. The IRS did something illegal. First, why would they do that? Like, I just don't understand. It's like, a police officer wouldn't get a gun and just randomly shoot someone on the street, because that's illegal. So the IRS, if there's a very clear line, you cannot raid an office without an attorney's office without a warrant. Is there any exceptions that we're missing? Is there anything at all that, just based on that alone, that should get your case, and at least part of your case, dismissed?
So I'm not an attorney, but that's 100% illegal in America, to the best of my understanding, with the only exception that I'm aware of being what's called like the crime fraud exception, which is where they say, if you were working with the attorney to commit a crime, then you don't have attorney-client privilege. But first of all, I wasn't working with him to commit a crime. And then second of all, how would they know that I was until after they had raided my attorney and gotten all of the documents anyhow? So it would have been illegal either way for them to do that. So the whole thing is just absolutely nuts. And so in addition to being innocent on the actual facts of the case, maybe the entire case is going to get thrown out just by the fact that they raided my attorney's office without a warrant as well.
And why did the Supreme Court not rule on that?
The decision's on there, is online. I don't know. I think they decided that it didn't fit the facts exactly. The fact that they took the case at all was pretty amazing. Like most cases, they don't take it all. There were literally oral arguments in front of the Supreme Court. You can go and Google it. I forget the exact name of the case. They didn't use my name, but they mentioned early crypto coin investor, so people will be able to figure out who that is. But I think regarding grand jury is the name of the Supreme Court.
How long has it been that you're facing those charges?
They've been investigating me since like 2017 or 2016 or something was when they first raided my office, and my I've been aware of this for a long time, and then actually towards the end of last year, the communications had kind of stopped with them, and my attorneys told me, they said, they have absolutely nothing because Roger, you did everything right. There's nothing here. Like they've probably gotten bored and they're just going to move on to something else. They said probably 85-90% chance that this is completely done and over. They said 10 or 15% chance that they're going to issue a secret arrest warrant for you, and then they'll grab you somewhere in the world. And I'm always an optimist. And I knew in my heart of hearts, I did my absolute best to pay everything properly and do all the paperwork properly. So I thought there's no way that these people are going to be that petty to try and arrest me for this when I did everything right. And turned out I underestimated the amount of pettiness of certain people in the IRS office there. And they had me arrested and have disrupted this entire last year of my life. But they've kept me from being able to visit my family in the U.S. since I think 2016 or 17 this all started. And so my parents are really getting up there in age. I would love to be able to go to see them, but they're not old enough, they're not in good enough health to be able to travel easily to come and see me. So this has really been a giant headache for me, and I just want the whole thing to end. I don't owe them a single penny. I did everything right and paid everything properly. But if they could come up with a number and show, here's why we think you owe this, and here's the math, and like everything makes sense, I would gladly pay it in a heartbeat. I see these people on the internet saying, Roger must have been, he must have been offered a deal and this and that. He's refusing to take it. Like, show me what I owe. Show me the law. I will gladly obey the law. Like I'm not arguing one bit with the law. I'll gladly pay whatever the law says that I owe, and that was my instruction to my attorneys to begin with. But the IRS, literally, like I said, we filed the Freedom of Information Act request asking them to show us what they think I owe. They still haven't been able to come up with a number because they don't know either. The whole thing was so new and complicated in 2014. We did the absolute best we could, and even today, we still think we did it properly.
That's crazy. Since 2016, you've been facing this investigation. Can you tell me about the day you were arrested?
Which actually we should back up. Since 2016, I believe, is when I became aware of the whole investigation and everything, which makes it even crazier because part of the charges, they're claiming that I was evading taxes in 2017. First of all, I would never try to evade taxes ever, but why the heck would I do it when I already knew I was under investigation? That's just insane for them to even claim that. So, and I'm sorry, what was the question that you started to ask me there?
I'm just curious about the day you were arrested.
Oh, yeah, I was on my way to leave Spain. I was literally checking out I was at the hotel in the lobby to check out and get all my things and leave. And I was in the lobby and I just finished a cryptocurrency conference here. There was a conference on privacy coins and cryptocurrency privacy. And in the hotel lobby, some guy that I didn't know came up to me and with a really thick Spanish accent to where I could barely understand him. He asked me, "Are you Roger Ver?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "Roger Ver," and I can't imitate his accent very well because it was so thick to where it wasn't even clear if he was saying Roger Ver or not. And then it went back and forth, 2 or 3 times. And when he finally realized that I'm confirming, yes, I'm Roger Ver, and he's just wearing normal clothes. He's not wearing a police officer uniform. He then pulled out and showed me a badge and said, "We have an Interpol arrest warrant for you. We're arresting you." And there were three plainclothes police officers, and they arrested me right there in the hotel lobby of the W Hotel in Barcelona. They took me off to the local city jail or something like that. I was in the city jail that night, and then the next morning they took me to some other holding cell where one at a time people in the holding cell were going to a video conference in front of a judge, but you don't get to see the video, you can only hear them. And everybody else that there were people that had been pickpocketing and doing actual crimes with actual victims. All those people were getting let out on bail, and I'm thinking I hope I'm going to get out on bail. And when I get there. There's a little hearing. It's all in Spanish. There's some and my Spanish it's better now than it was a year ago, but it's still not very good. And at that point, it was even worse. And so everything's through this translator. And I forget, they're sent there to spy on the people in the prisons. So it's a lot of people were very wary of me. Luckily, nobody realized who I was or what my background in cryptocurrency was, or I could have been in more trouble with who knows what they would have tried to do to me or extort me or who knows what. But for 3.5 weeks there, I was in jail before I finally managed. My attorney convinced the Spanish government to grant me bail, and I've been out on bail in Spain now for I think coming up on 8 or 9 months on 150,000 euro bail, and haven't fled. No intention to flee. I'm 100% on board with fighting this within the legal system, and hope to be victorious because the facts are clearly on my side in regards to this.
I want to press again on the question. First is just, it's so perplexing to see one of the people that spearheaded one of the biggest innovations of our lifetime be sitting in a jail in Mallorca for such charges. It just doesn't make sense. The US, land of the free, innovation, entrepreneurship, and then we see cases like this. It's just such a heartbreaking paradox. But I want to go back to the day you were arrested. How did it feel? For me, I always try to put myself in the shoes of the people I talk to. And it just seems like I would just imagine my heart just drop and that feeling of just shock and weakness.
The bottom of my stomach dropped off, right out of the bottom of my stomach in the hotel lobby there. And they put the handcuffs on me, and then they went with me to my hotel room, and they got all of my electronics. So they took all my cell phones and computers and every last little USB cable and everything. It just was a really sickening feeling because I don't know, it feels like this, you're in this, and thankfully I've never been in a physically abusive, relationship where I'm getting, beaten repeatedly or anything like that, but it felt like that's what this was. I'm trying to break up with this person, and they won't let you leave, right? And they're literally go to the other side of the planet to harass you and cause problems in your life. And it's not like I'm accused of murder. I'm not accused of robbery. I'm not accused of assault. I'm literally accused of figuring out, putting the wrong numbers on some tax forms and not paying the right amount is what I'm accused of. There's no victim there. And even if I was completely guilty, the correct solution would be pay some money and figure out how to handle that. But instead they're wanting me to die in prison. And that just shows.
That's crazy.
This isn't about taxes. It's about my political views and my political stance and the things I've been saying out there to the world. They're really, really upset about those things, and they don't want me to continue.
I literally called my accountants at all my companies, asked them to do a full audit of everything. I've asked them to find third party, because doing these audits, if I one day face what you're facing for whatever reason, let's call it lawfare, I'll at least have so much material there, be overly ready, which you said that you did already because you were worried about a day like this. But last 48 hours, I've just been calling the different managers and accountants that I have, say, hey, look, I need everything checked. I need it rechecked. Everything looks good. Check it again. Have someone else check it. It's just really scary. And I remember in one of your interviews, you said they tried to silence you back in 2000, and when you were first arrested, the firecrackers, 2012, whatever it was. You said that they tried to silence you, and they succeeded because you started getting scared. You left the country and you were scared and speaking out. And that reminds me of a quote. You probably remember the quote, but if you stand silent when you see injustice, if everyone stands silent, they eventually will come after you. Actually, you said that quote in one of your interviews. Can you repeat that quote?
Yeah, I heard it somewhere else, and so I'm going to butcher the original quote, but it's something along the lines
I've butchered it even more, so.
I'll give it another try. So, when the government comes for a certain group, if you don't speak out, or if we don't speak out, nothing's going to happen. They'll come for the next group, and they'll come for the next group, and if nobody speaks out, eventually there's going to be nobody left to speak out for you when they come for you. And so, we have to keep speaking out all the time, or they're going to take each of us down one at a time. And it's absolutely true. And so, thank you for giving me this platform today to speak out. This is absolute lawfare against me. And we've seen it happening more and more around the world. It's a really horrible, vicious perversion of the law. And anybody that cares about truth and justice and the rule of law needs to speak out about these sort of things whenever they see it happening. And so luckily I have a loud voice myself, and you have an even bigger platform. So thank you so much for helping spread the truth about this, because it's a disaster for everybody, not just my own life.
And we're seeing more and more people in the US and the rest of the world starting to speak out. So we're starting to see that shift, and hopefully that works to your advantage. Now, obviously, I'm not a lawyer, but if you're found guilty of some of the charges, I think what you said earlier is all right, cool. I made a mistake. Let's say it wasn't intentional. Tell me what I owe you, and I'll pay everything, and I'll pay the fines. If you face a short period of time in jail for what you've done, you may deserve it depending what the charges are, what's true, what's not. But to be facing life in prison, no matter what you're guilty and not guilty of, for such charges, you haven't killed anybody, you haven't harmed anybody. It is just very, very perplexing and very, very scary to see. But I do want to go to I've got two other questions here. Is Russ Ulbricht has been pardoned? Why do you think you haven't been pardoned?
I think the administration's only been in power a few days now, right? Maybe, 9 days, 10 days, something like that. Let's give them a little bit of time to review everything and see the facts of the case. And once they see the facts of the case and the truth, I still have some hope that justice will prevail. So, but it's up to them. If they want to pardon me, fantastic. I'll gladly accept it. But if they don't, then I'll continue and fight the regular legal battle. But it would be nice. Again, it's their decision, not mine.
So two things. On Polymarket as well, I'm sure you check that on a regular basis. The odds of you being pardoned was at 30-something% a few days ago, sorry.
Yeah.
And now I checked it this morning, it was down to 6%. So I want to ask you about the sentiment there. So you haven't been pardoned. Elon made the comments. Polymarket shows people don't think you'll be pardoned. The likelihood is very, very slim. And also, I just don't see in something that's heartbreaking, considering what you've done for the industry, the crypto community is not rallying around you. Then everyone should be posting about this. Everyone should be talking about this. Everyone should be shedding light to this. At least people in the industry that you've helped build. Why do you think that is?
I think that a lot of them have stood up for me. So Jesse Powell, the CEO of Kraken, put out a beautiful tweet about me, calling for me to be pardoned. Peter Smith, the CEO of blockchain.com, has done the same thing. And I'm sure David Bailey has spoken out publicly in front of me, or in favor of me. Lots and lots of these people have. And so I think the only people that haven't are just the people that are maybe new to crypto, and they don't know everything that went on before this civil war that went on with the Bitcoin. But this isn't about block size debate or Bitcoin Cash versus Bitcoin or anything like that. This is about truth and justice. And are we going to allow governments to imprison innocent people and go after political opponents? Or are we going to stand up for freedom of speech and freedom of expression? And anybody that's involved in Bitcoin should be in favor of freedom of speech and freedom of expression. And they should be standing up for me and people like Roman as well, the Tornado Cash guy, and the Samurai Wallet guys. And there's just, unfortunately, list after list of people within cryptocurrency that are building tools to enable more financial independence through the use of cryptocurrency. The Biden administration was going after them, one after another. And I'm just one of the most high-profile ones, but there's a lot of them out there. Ian Freeman is another, absolutely deserves to be set free. That guy's in jail right now for running a Bitcoin ATM machine. And it's just crazy that sort of thing would be happening in what's supposed to be the land of the free. And so I'm cautiously optimistic that the new administration is going to correct a lot of those wrongs that were put into place by the Biden administration.
What would be your message? And I was going to say that message for you, but I'd rather you say it. For those people that didn't like you back during the Civil War days, the Bitcoin Civil War, what would be your message to them? You kind of said it already in a way, but I want you to expand it. I kind of started off for you. They can hate you, they can despise you, but we're debating Bitcoin, the technology behind it. Neither side, no one there should be harmed, should be taken to jail for claims like this, should be killed. So what would be your message to those people?
Yeah, my message to those people is this isn't about Bitcoin. This isn't about block size. This is simply about like freedom of speech and preventing governments from targeting political opponents. And so, and you don't even have to take my word for it. Head on over to freerogernow.org. The literal court filings are there to download. Download them. You can read them all yourself, but an even easier thing is just to upload them to whatever LLM you want and ask the LLM for its opinion as well. And I'll say Roger's arguments are much stronger than the government's arguments. And I'll say it clearly again. The IRS, they're just plain lying in the indictment, and they even lied to the court here in Spain as well, trying to get me extradited to the U.S. Like they know 100% for sure that I'm innocent of the things they're accusing me of, and they have proof of it in writing, and they're just simply ignoring it and lying to the court here in Spain, trying to get me extradited as well. It's just really, really disappointing. And hopefully, Kash Patel's going to clean house at the FBI, and I think they're going to clean house at the IRS and DOJ as well. Hopefully, these rogue, bad actors there that are, lying to different courts around the world, trying to go after their political opponents like myself. Hopefully, they're going to be, have to look for a new job somewhere here real soon. That's my hope for what will happen here shortly. Which is lucky that all they have to do is look for a new job, whereas myself, I've been dealing with the rest of my life in prison. So that's a pretty fair trade in their favor that they just have to get a new job rather than have to deal with everything that I had to deal with because of their basically decade of harassment in regards to this at this point.
I wouldn't wish this against my worst enemy. What type of person would look at their rival and say, look, I want them to spend the rest of their time in jail, to just rot in jail, to die in jail? That's just crazy to imagine someone would do that, let alone someone within the legal system. Obviously, I'm basing this on the assumption that you're innocent. And from what I've seen, I'm not a lawyer. The charges to be facing life in jail just don't add up in any way. And I think most people would agree on that. Last thing I want to say,
I'm completely innocent, but even if I was completely guilty, 109 years is insane.
It's fucking stupid. It's stupid. It's stupid.
And of those 109 years, 90 of them are for 3 counts of mail fraud, which is literally claiming because I sent the tax return in the mail, right?
No.
My lawyer said,
go ahead, continue, sorry.
They said, my lawyer said they only charge people with mail fraud in regards to tax stuff when they really want to send the person a message, a big giant FU. And so that's clearly what's going on in my case as well.
But from what I understood is that, so what do you mean it's just sending it by mail? Because you said that in your Tucker Carlson interview. But I want to understand it further. It's the fact that the documents were fraudulent, allegedly. That's what they're claiming. The documents were fraudulent. Are you saying that because you sent them by mail instead of email, you face even more years in jail?
Well, I think they would have charged me with like electronic wire fraud or something if I sent it by email. But they put a postage stamp on the document, on the envelope, and sent it in the postal mail that gets delivered by a mailman. That's what 90 of the 109 years are for, because they claim they were sent in the mail, and like that's some additional crime in the U.S. apparently. Crazy, yeah, but that's the truth of that just shows like how crazy the charges are altogether, that they would even charge anybody with something like that.
As you said, if they want to come after you, they'll find a way. There's just so many laws, and it's just so convoluted. Even a lawyer is confused. Someone that spends all their life studying a certain subject, even a lawyer would look at the laws and they'll be like, you should be okay. I'm like, hey, I want to know 100% if I do this, am I okay? Am I not okay? It should be very clear because I don't want to do the wrong thing. Like, you know what? You should be okay, but you never know. And it's just these ambiguities is what allows people that want to be targeted for various political purposes to be targeted. That you don't, things are murky. Crypto was the perfect example of that, especially in 2014. Nothing was clear back then, including how to value Bitcoin with a lack of liquidity. So when you have those ambiguities, it just makes it very difficult to navigate.
And at the time I renounced, there had literally been not a single word of guidance in regards to how to treat cryptocurrencies from the IRS. There was absolutely nothing.
And we were begging for that guidance. That's the thing. We were begging for that guidance to exactly avoid what you're facing right now. That's exactly what we wanted to avoid. Every company in the industry. And we're finally getting it now, 11 years later. Roger, when are you going to...
And it's still not clear 11 years later, though, too. They're still adding new guidance and there's still some confusion.
But at least we're on the right track, finally, under this administration. I can't even imagine where we would be if the administration, everything remained the same and we continued down that path. What's the next for you? When is there a date for the extradition and what happens next?
Yeah, any day now. And it's 5 p.m. here in Spain. It's unlikely they're going to come and arrest me today and put me back in jail, but this late in the day, but maybe tomorrow's going to be the day. Any day now they're going to issue the ruling in Spain, and if they decide that they're going to extradite me, they're probably going to put me in jail that very same day, and then we'll see how long it takes for the U.S. Marshals to come and grab me here in the U.S. So
you expect you expect to be extradited? That's it's above 50%.
I don't know what the percentage is, right? I'm not Spanish. I'm not a Spanish law expert, but if Spain decides to extradite me to the U.S., then I'll be back in jail again. And it's also clear, like one of the arguments against the extradition here in Spain is something that's called like a forum shopping, which means like the United States, they knew right before I came to Spain, they knew I was in Dubai. Before that, they knew I was in Singapore. Before that, they knew I was in Korea. They knew I was in Japan. I was in Bali before that. Like, they knew I was in all of these places. They waited to arrest me until I was in Spain because Spain is such a close ally of the U.S. and so they thought Spain would be much more likely to extradite me to the U.S. than, Singapore, Japan, or Korea or somewhere like that. So, like, they're not allowed to do that. If there's an arrest warrant, they're supposed to grab you in whatever country you are and work with the laws there. And so the fact that they waited for me to go to Spain is another strike against the U.S. and just shows how dishonest they're being in regards to all of this.
It's heartbreaking to see people, you're very wealthy, obviously, and you've got the money to spend on doing all these different videos and get the reach that you have, paying all the legal fees. But imagine they do this to some journalist somewhere that barely has enough money to pay the bills. Imagine what
you don't have to imagine it. They do it.
Yeah.
You don't have to. You just don't hear about it because they don't have as big of a platform or they weren't as well known as I was. But you don't have to imagine it. They're doing it to people right now.
Now, what I mean, imagine being in their place, but it is happening, and I empathize with all those people. The more I do what I'm doing for the past couple of years, the more I realize. Now, again, I'm an optimist, as you know. I'm pretty naive. Well, I was pretty naive. Lawfare is real, and as you said, Roger, if you sit there silently, they come after that person and this person and that person. And if everyone sits there silently and doesn't talk about it, they'll eventually come for you. Maybe not now, maybe in a year, maybe in 10 years. And that's what's scary. But Roger, I'm pretty confident that we'll be sitting in a cafe somewhere talking about this in the US a few years from now, and I hope so. And thanks for what you've done for the space. I hope justice prevails, and I appreciate you coming on the show, man.
My pleasure, and I hope I get to see you in the U.S. This year, sitting in a coffee shop as a free man and discussing the wonderful innovation that's happening in the world of cryptocurrency inside the U.S. now that we have an administration that's friendly towards it. Thank you so much.
Just to be clear, when I say in a few years, what I meant innocent, as in you found innocent, but I know the legal process takes some time. But I do agree with you. I hope it's this year, and you don't even have to go through that legal process. But at the end of the day, the most important thing is that justice prevails, and it's heartbreaking what you've gone through already, but what will be more heartbreaking is seeing someone like yourself die in jail, and that's just disgraceful.